that.
With his fourth appearance leading the way, Chris Rainsforth. This is now just maybe there's a branch out podcast of Get Out of Rap. We should just be Get Out of Rapping at the fireside, like two old men sat with our blankets on, moaning and reminiscing.
But I like a good moan, I must admit. It is it is something I'm known for.
But I say that, not old. You were just saying, as a result of your fitness regime, you're the fittest you've ever been, and more power to you. And I, something you said then was around, well, I thought was really, I just stuck it in my mind going, yeah, got to get back on it, was start. You should have started earlier, but there's nothing like start now, isn't it? No, and then in the 3 months, you'll be like.
I look at it this way going, what I've achieved over the last, well, since August last year, when I first started taking it seriously to where I am now, I just kind of think if I'd done this when I was in my 20s, do you know what I mean? It's like, but I'm in my 40s, and I look at it, the reason the change happened was I knew I was getting older, and I didn't want to get to a point at kind of 50, 60-year-old where I'd kind of just let everything go. And I'm hoping the changes will prolong my existence a little bit more, and get past that point and go into retirement fit and healthy and be able to enjoy
it. Yes, mate, I love it. So we've talked kind of like all the way through this and before lockdown. It's a little bit like BC and AD, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as we're starting to enjoy some freedoms again and coming out of lockdown, what's kind of been on your mind? What's the good and the bad?
Couple of things, right? So I think the good is that we're coming out of it, right? I think we all knew that at some point this would happen. Nobody thought it'd take as long as what it has. When we take stock and think about the journey we've all been on this last kind of 12, 18 months. I think the good thing is that we're coming out of it. And I think the other side of that is that it's forced people to think differently. And I've mentioned this to you before, that actually the way we use what we've learned this last year, it'll be what defines us going forward. Even little things, the appreciation of little things. I had a chat with a pal of mine at the weekend, and we're meeting for a drink tomorrow night after work. So we'll meet up and we'll have a pint. I've not seen him since it all started, and you kind of think. And I was going, I'm really excited, and I felt excited just about going out for an hour after work for a pint, and it was that draw that conversation. But you know what? I hope no matter what happens, we all come out of this just appreciating those little things that we've taken for granted so much in our lives. Convenience and the ability to do things that the freedoms that have been taken away from us, we're now getting excited about. And I think that's a positive thing for me, that if we can take that positivity forward and just appreciate those things again, and just don't take things for granted anymore, learn from that, and just make sure that we come out of this in a better frame of mind. So they're the good things. I think the bad things, is there a bad thing? I don't know. I think the kind of bit that we've got to be wary of, in my mind, is letting people go at their own pace. I think that for me is still something that we really need to consider. People will have different thoughts, and you've seen it over this last couple of weeks as freedoms have been allowed. There's still people going, I'm not doing it until it calms down. I'm not going to risk it until it calms down. Let the novelty of the new freedom kind of dissipate a little bit, and then I might take those first steps out and kind of do it. So I think we've just got to be mindful that people are going to do this at a different pace. The vaccination rollout has been phenomenal, and that'll provide confidence, and all those things will happen. But we as leaders just need to make sure that we are taking into account still everyone's individuality and allow them to come out of it at their own pace. No forcing of stuff, and let's keep the good stuff going that we've managed to do over the last 12-18 months, and don't kind of revert back to the way of doing things that could cause a massive negative impact on people.
Yeah, I love it. I definitely think there's something in appreciation of small things, appreciation of connection and community around. For me, like that kind of level of excitement you just explained, I felt about playing five-a-side football, playing football again, and taking one of my girls to her football. That was the first thing I did actually. It's in this lovely set of football pitches, really nice, and not that I never saw it as a chore in the past anyway, but I know some other parents did. Everyone was just excited to see a pitch full of different age groups of kids playing football. All their parents stood watching, and when you first gathered, everyone does it now more conscious of space and distance. I know you could tell, but everyone just sort of gathered. Everyone was smiling.
Yeah.
Every parent was like, yeah, hey, isn't this good? Good to see you. The girls were excited. It was just brilliant. And I hope that kind of, you have kind of got we've been through an experience together. So there's a sense of community there. But I think there's also there is an appreciation of the things that matter. And it is those connections and doing things and just, not having to just go for a walk all the time.
Yeah. To be fair though,
what should we do tonight? Go for a walk? Yeah, why not?
Yeah, let's do that. But I think that's been a catalyst as well for a lot of things.
Yeah, so, I like walking.
I've grown to love it in a way that I never would, especially on a morning. And I know you follow us on Strava and things like that, but it's that, and you talked about on LinkedIn, that kind of separation of starting your working day and finding routines that allow you to separate the fact that we're stuck in our houses all day. So how do you separate that? I'm sat here in front of a computer screen and I do meetings like this, like thousands of other people are doing, and it's back to back and back to back. It's a completely different level of tiredness now than I've probably ever experienced in my working life, because it's, I had this conversation with a colleague last week saying, back in the day, it's only kind of 2 years ago, right? But back in the day, you'd book like a 2-hour meeting with a customer or a client, and that'd be your day, because you'd have to get a train or you'd jump in the car and have a drive, and that 2-hour meeting would be your day. And now that 2-hour meeting is just a 2-hour meeting, and you might have another four.
It's a fifth of your day now, isn't it?
Yeah, you might have another 4 2-hour meetings scheduled in as well. So actually, I think we've become more productive, and you've still got to balance it. But I think we have become a bit more productive in what we can do. But the level of fatigue that I feel now is completely different. Mentally drained, tired, eye strain, those types of things have all become commonplace. So the only way I've got now to try and separate that, or before we kind of eased out of lockdown, was to make sure I had a completely clear head in the morning, and going out for an hour and walking for a few miles helped me do that, so I could come back in and start the day. And then similarly post work, right, going out and doing something, so whether that's exercise in the garage, in the gym in the garage, or going out for another walk or whatever, it's complete separation. And every now and again there's a risk that you kind of don't, I always try to make sure I turn my computer off so it's not blinking at us when I walk through the house and I see an email pop up and things like that. Those kind of habits you've had to form. But the getting out and walking and doing that stuff has been a godsend for me, and not something I would have ever done before lockdown, because you were always doing, I need to get in the car, or I need to get to the train station, or I need to get to the airport, or whatever those things are. That was your start of the day. So now I think I've got a better routine, and I feel mentally more prepared to start a day than I did. But equally feel as mentally drained when the end of the day comes. Right? It's been a complete shift in behaviour.
I think there's something in you said as well about as leaders, we've just still got to maintain this understanding of people's individual spaces, energies, and also where they are in terms of being able to adapt to this and yet another change. And I read this article about how this period has accelerated how work is changing, and some of these patterns, some of these themes and trends were taking place anyway, but now it's forced everyone to kind of consider them and accommodate them, the working from home. And it was a really nice article that talked about how as leaders we should be looking more at generating trust than productivity. Than if your first conversation and measure that you focus on is productivity, that you suffer as a result of that. In especially with people, you're going to have a workforce where now one thing I think we can all say, and you mentioned polls on LinkedIn before we started recording. I think the thing you can say with confidence is we're going to have a high proportion of people working from home, higher than we've ever had in the past. Yeah. And trust is going to be a key differentiator for employment and for both recruitment, engagement, and retaining staff, that you can evidence that you trust them over and above going straight in on productivity stats.
Yeah.
I just thought it was an interesting angle, and it'd be good to get your take on those kind of the polls and what those are saying, and that there's far too many of them for one, but also what are going to be some of the key operating models and principles that we have in this this next period, if you like, of where we are.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, right? I think everyone's asking the same questions, and you mentioned polls, right? And they are a bugbear of mine, but they're a bugbear of mine because everyone's asking the same question, and it's like, well, you know what, the type of question you're asking, what would you prefer working? You're going to elicit the same response all the time. Everyone's going to have their own personal preference. It's kind of a moot point, right? For me, the point is that you're going to have a mix of people that want to do one or the other, or a mixture. That's just the way it is. And it's that's not going to change. You will have people that want to come in and work in the office full time. You will have some people that want to work at home full time, and you will have some people that want to do a bit of both. I think what we've got to be preparing for is that eventuality, and actually still make sure we've got an infrastructure that supports that choice, because we can do it, and we've proven we can do it. So there's no argument about should we or shouldn't we. The argument is around how do we actually formalize it in a way that makes it a more permanent solution. So how do we make sure that if people are wanting to work from home, how do we make sure they're set up for success while they're working from home, if that's their permanent choice? What level of support do we need to give them in terms of the space that they're working in, the equipment they've got, the technology they need? Those things where we've kind of just sheep dipped and said, do this. It's now actually, how do we make these things permanent? And I think that's the next step. If it's an office-based environment, people want to get back, welcome them with open arms and say, let them get in, but create safety and security for them to be able to do it. The thing that kind of I feel is too much of a knee-jerk reaction to everything, and there's different commentaries on this, and there's a couple of different articles out there over the last few weeks where you've got on one side going, I'm just going to take everybody back at the office. As soon as I'm allowed, everyone's going back in the office. And then on the flip side of that, you've got organizations going, actually, everyone can just stay at home now, and we're going to shut all our offices down. Now, I know you've got to look after the business, and I understand that from a commercial aspect in terms of rents and commercial property and the outgoings that generates. But by kind of forcing a choice on people will create additional problems for you as a business, whether that's through retention, whether it's through turnover of staff, whatever those things are. They will be a direct symptom of the action you take at this point now. And I think we've got to a point this year where we can start to think about that entire kind of operational makeup of our employee base completely differently, you know, in terms of the skills that we recruit, in terms of the type of people we recruit, and where we recruit them from and how we recruit them. And those things now are things that we can start to look at and be really flexible with, and provide more choice, more options, more support, all the good stuff that we should want to invest in to make sure we are delivering the best service to our customers by giving our people the best chance of success.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. That kind of it may mean more work for the leadership of companies, I guess. You know, we've certainly had to consider more individual cases and circumstances, but I think it's made us better as a result. We understand our teams more. We understand we have a far more informed context of where people are coming from to work, their home situations and things like that. And it's been fascinating. And I think as a result of spending the time to look at people and consider them as individuals, we've gained massively with engagement. We did a town hall last week, virtual one, where normally they would set up a little mini stage. We'd have our gigs. We'd get on there and have a chat. And we did a virtual one, and I would say it was the most engaging one we've done in terms of even just the functionality of having chat running through as the leadership team were talking, and we had a host, and there was far more. There was a Q&A section, there was a chat section. So chat was commentary around some of the stuff we were saying. Q&A, we had that section at the end. And I think in a comparison to in real life, face to face, maybe one or two people would ask a question. They would, I think people were far less intimidated to they can put more considered questions in the chat. And it was just brilliant. And it was something that I think we all agreed afterwards, we're going to do this again, but in this format. So there's definitely been so many benefits. I do wonder about what this experience has been like for our frontline teams. We talk about Zoom fatigue from meetings back to back. I would love to know more about how it's been for those people that are dealing with calls.
Yeah.
Contact center versus home. Do you get any sense of that, of where that's?
The same challenges apply, right? And I think when we speak to customers around, how do they support people, and part of that is, making sure the organisations that are doing it well, goes back to your point of being really individual in their approach and actually scheduling things slightly differently. So making sure people are not sitting there in 5-6 hour blocks of time, just kind of back to back to back, which, not saying you can get away with it when you're in the office, but that traditional way of going, you're on shift, you start at 8 o'clock, you'll have a break at 10 o'clock, then have a lunch at 12 o'clock, whatever. So you've got those blocks of time. What we're seeing more people do is this kind of, approach where it's more shorter, kind of snappier blocks of time to give people more natural breaks in their day, to allow them that kind of gap, that space, that time just to take a step away before they kind of come back onto it. Every industry is different in terms of the demands that have been put on them. But there is some significant industries that I would imagine throughout this period have had a lot of negative contact, for want of a better phrase. And that is draining. And me and you both been there, Martin, where, I worked in the utilities industry for years. Before that, I used to work for a company, I'm not going to mention the company name, got told off, but we did toys and distribution of toys. And you can imagine when deliveries delayed at certain points, it was late for a birthday present or it didn't arrive in time for Christmas, that kind of level of emotion that gets driven through this situation we found ourselves in through the pandemic. There's certain industries where that emotion is rife, holidays, for example, those types of, emotional attached conversations, you cannot expect someone to deal with call after call after call after call when they're going through their own emotional turmoil by being in the middle of a pandemic, having to work from home, having to adjust their whole kind of work-life balance to accommodate things. So we've had, people have had to be smarter around the time that they give people to recover from that, and allowing them more natural breaks in their day and stuff like that. Not saying everyone's doing that, but the good ones that we've seen have taken a real personal approach to the way they schedule their people to make sure they continue to get the best out of them, rather than kind of overburdening them with demand.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're taking me back to my agent days, and one of the companies I worked at was financial services, and I spent a good year and a bit maybe doing collections, and this was at a time when there wasn't really any emphasis on mental health, for sure, but that was draining as hell because you weren't hearing good news stories. You were talking to people who were struggling and trying to help them with plans and things. Just as you were talking then, and you made me think about how that would have been if I'd have been working from home, would have made it harder, because actually it was my colleagues around me and being able to both share with them, vibe with them, distract ourselves, whatever it took, really. That's what kept you going. To have that removed would have been really tough. And I think that kind of, let's hope that the practices now, with a better understanding of mental health and the drain that doing the work has on our frontline team members in the industry, means more regular check-ins from their team leaders, where they can talk about mental health openly. They can talk just health in general, but also how people are doing. Because let's be honest, this whole period has seen a increase in anxiety or in various guises and formats, and then the knock-on effect of that, of course, is then, are we skilling our team leaders effectively enough, not only to be able to deal with their team members, but to be dealing with them in a remote and then hybrid, is a real challenge, isn't it? For what is, let's be honest, a challenging role anyway, first role in management.
Agreed. And I think, the embracing of technology will allow us to do a lot of those things. I think the focus sometimes has to be on the right people. So team leader need to have a focus for sure. I think, that's a critical role in our industry. But back to another point you made there around, the kind of relationships we build within contact centres. I look back, and one of my best pals, we worked together in the first ever contact centre we worked in. We're best pals now, kind of 20 odd years later, and it's like, you kind of do build relationships and friendships for life in that environment. And go back to these polls that are on LinkedIn around, do you want to work in an office back up? For me, I'd be interested to understand, in terms of our industry, from a contact centre perspective, if you ask that question, what difference would it be when you look at it from a general perspective? So if I work, take my wife, for example, she works for the water board in the northeast. And she's been able to do a lot of work from home. She's worked from home all the way through the pandemic, but she's not in an operational role. She's not in a customer service role. She's not in that. So actually, the draw of going back at the office is less. But when you have got those office relationships in a contact centre, the fact that you rely on each other through the difficult times where you've had a bad call, to be able to kind of turn around and have a a conversation with the person sitting next to you, I'd be interested to understand what their difference in that is. So if we just purely pulled a contact centre audience and said, would you rather go back at the office and see your pals or stay at home, would there be a difference in terms of the general feeling around everyone wants to be hybrid or most people want to work from home? I wonder if there's going to be a difference there just because of that whole relationship piece that we have. I don't think I've seen a poll for that. Maybe we could get someone on LinkedIn to do that.
Yeah, we should, because I was just thinking then, if that's me in my agent days, probably even me now, I'm going back in, because purely from the practical jokes point of view, the person that sat next to you when they go for a break, moving their chair or lowering it so they just sit down a little bit more. My fiance's really fed up with me doing that, and she's my one victim all day. So just from the practical joke point of view, I'm back in 100%.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It goes back to that. We've got to give people the choice. And I think, and support that choice, whatever it is. And we might see that. We might see that actually in our industry, in contact centres, we do see a big influx of people going back at the office. We might see that. It's really interesting. It's who knows where we'll be in 6 months' time? Who knows? As we get past June, and for those listening in the UK, that's apparently the last time we're allowed. There's no restrictions come middle of June, so we'll see what that actually happens. Then, I think in terms of that return to work. But the bit for me that I always keep coming back to is, let's think about your point, the anxieties of people, and let people take it at their own pace. I can't stress that enough. I think that's the bit that we really have to be mindful of. It's the bit that I keep coming back to, say, it doesn't matter if you want people back in the office or not. Doesn't matter, from an operational perspective, if that's what you want. It shouldn't be about what you want as a business at this stage. It should be about what your people want, and what you can do to support it. It's like anything, we all think that there'll be even going back to my operational planning days, you'd have conversations with people going, oh, well, we always struggle with certain shift rotation, or we never get enough people signing up to late shifts, or we never get enough people to work Christmas or bank holidays or whatever. And I was like, you know what, just ask the question. And that used to be like, just ask the question. Let's actually ask who wants to do it, because you know what, there'll be people out there that don't care about Christmas for whatever reason. They don't celebrate it, whether it's religion based or whether it's just personal choice that Christmas is not for them. Same with bank holidays, same with evenings. People like that lifestyle. So let's just ask the question. Let's not try and overthink it. Let's just ask. So that's what we need to start doing now. Let's just ask the question, because we'll be surprised by the answer, I think. But we overthink it sometimes and try to force an ideal rather than just saying, well, let's just ask the people that we're going to actually be impacting, right? And see if we can cover what we need to cover. So if you had a business and when we could only have 50% of our people in the office because of social distancing, who wants to come to the office? You'll get your 50%. Who's happy to work at home? You'll get your other 50%. It'll just happen naturally. But if we don't ask the questions, we'll never know the answer.
Well, that's certainly determining our approaches. Our guys, our teams, we've been surveying them regularly, trying to get a sense of, trying to get exactly that, exact numbers around who wants to come back, under what circumstances, what do they need, who's going to stay at home. And that has been enlightening, really, just around what we need to do, what people want to do, and hopefully means that we'll make a more informed decision for the benefit of everyone, which has got to be a good thing. I wonder if it'd be good to get your view on. I rang one of a utilities company the other day, and it surprised me. They had a message on there saying due to COVID, and in the end I gave up waiting because it was like 10 minutes. And then I saw, again, it might have been another poll about whether it's still acceptable for contact centres to be saying that. What's your view?
My view, this is my opinion, is that we should not be using that excuse anymore. I think, I think, like anything, right, we've had plenty of time to adjust the way we operate to deal with what we're dealing with right now. And I don't think it's half as bad as what it was, when this first started. There's no way. I think we, as customers, would quite happily forgive people in that first 2, 3, 4 months. I think, the level of tolerance, I think, for people having to adjust and those types of things. I think, 18 months in, we should not be in a position where we're using COVID as a reason for not delivering good service. I just don't see that.
I agree. And I think what's interesting is I had no particular opinion on this utility company prior to that call. And now it's a bit of a litmus test for me. It's kind of like, are you serious? Are you really using that now as a reason that you can't answer my call within 5 minutes is okay. I'm happy to wait 5 minutes. But to not even pick up after 10 and to still be saying it's COVID related, now my opinion of that company is based on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, there's that. It comes down to that of going, yes, yes, you might be limited in what you can do, and that's fine. There's a few companies where you will speak to them but you'll get through and you'll have the service, and then some of the services that they can provide are slightly different, and you respect that because of rules of entering houses and those types of things, and you can expect some of that to still be the case. You can expect, some pockets of issues where people are having to, self-isolate and things like that. If you're wanting a field worker to come out, for example, to do something, fix your boiler or whatever that might be. I think from a contact centre, we had this issue. I had to self-isolate during this, and I still worked because I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't having to go to the office, but I was working here. So there's no reason why, from a business perspective, that if you are in that situation, contact centre wise, if you're working from home, that would have a negative impact on your staffing, I wouldn't have thought. But I can't see why people would still use that as an excuse. We've had plenty of time to adjust and deal with those issues, and kind of get ready for moving forward, rather than still looking back 12 months and say, well, we've got this thing going on, so we'll continually use it as an excuse. It's poor service for me, that.
I think we have to be better. I agree with you. If you're listening out there and you have a recorded message saying anything about COVID related disruption to service, it doesn't help the perception of our industry. I don't think you should have had it figured out by now. You don't need the message. Just get on with it. It would have been better to not have that message and still wait. Having the message was just making me think, oh, you guys are useless.
Yeah, it's inflammatory, right? It's inflammatory when you're making an excuse for bad service before you've delivered bad service.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's like a warning, isn't it? We're going to be rubbish.
We're going to be rubbish. Just so you know.
Lower your expectations.
You might want to make a different decision right now. I think so I think there's that bit. I think that apologise for bad service before you actually have a chance to deliver service. I think if they're, if you are that company and you need some help, please get in touch. I'll more than happy to help you with your planning needs. It's fine. It's what I do for a living. But I think that's an issue for me, right? It is an issue for me, and it's an issue for me in all walks of life. Even outside the pandemic, I think that whole precursor to poor service, regardless of what you're doing, I think always is a bit of a bugbear of mine. So I think if you are struggling, sometimes you'll go onto a website and you'll go to try and contact them, and they've switched off things like live chat, and they've switched off things, contact channels, because there's some kind of challenge from a demand perspective. And that for me just it doesn't work from a customer perception point of view, that you kind of already putting barriers up, you're making it difficult, and you kind of calling out that you're not delivering the greatest service that you can. And I think that just puts the seed of doubt in everyone's mind. I think there's open and honest customer service is what generates loyalty and what generates kind of that stickability in terms of, am I going to continue to utilize that service going forward? I think the pandemic bore that out for a lot of people. Different companies dealing with the situation different ways, whether that was the financial institutions that were dealing with things like the mortgage holiday and payment breaks and those types of things, and you had ones that mobilized really quickly, dealt with it and delivered great service. So as a customer, you think, what, I felt really protected and safe and supported by that institution. Others that really made a dog's dinner of it, which again, when it comes to your mortgage renewal time in a year's time or whatever, what you're going to do, you're going to say, well, actually, no, I didn't feel supported there, so I want to start looking elsewhere. And similarly with the holiday companies, and similarly with everyone, we all know people got put under pressure through this, and we will all accept that, and no one's going to ever say anything different. But I think the measure of the business was how they reacted in that initial stages of the pandemic, and how they reacted and how they supported customers, how they, we worked with customers that were segregating things out and going, this is really important, so we're going to just take this over here and deal with this separately. And all the BAU stuff, because people still needed the BAU questions answered, we'll deal with them over here. But all this COVID related stuff, we're going to ring fence, we're going to staff it, we're going to support it. So actually, when our customers get in touch with us, they know they're our priority and we can deal with them directly and immediately, not make them wait half an hour or a few days for a response or whatever it is. And those companies that did that really mobilized really quickly, and they'll get the rewards for that going forward, as they became, as they showed that kind of supportive nature. The ones that kind of buried their head in the sands and went, what, it's all just going to come in and we'll just deal with it when we get to it. And they're the ones that are going to suffer. And I think that's the bit now that people are going to have to try. What's the recovery now for some of those organisations where they didn't make the best decisions at the start for whatever reason?
I like that kind of prioritisation. I also think it talks about something. We're all customers, right? And I think as customers, we have shown that we're far more adaptable. So we're being asked to do more different things to engage with a company or utilize a service. And some places have been really creative and great. I think the key thing that's, for me, come out of this whole period is around effort. So knowing that your customer's a bit more adaptable, but are you still making it as easy as possible? If you have to go onto an app to then carry on the conversation or generate a token or whatever it may be, but it's easy to do, and you get in front of the person that's going to help you with your query, happy days. But if the effort is high, at a time when most studies will say, as consumers, we have been more patient than in the past. That's wearing thin now, I think. But like I say, there's been some really creative stuff. I think a lot of the public services should be applauded for how whether that's education or health, how they still managed how you can still interact with doctors and the kids with their schools and things like that. They probably have the biggest changes and the most risk, yet they've been really creative. Same with a lot of retailers in contact services, contact center industry. So there's a lot there's been a lot that's great, but maybe that spectrum of good versus bad has got wider. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the other challenge we're going to get now is this kind of what's the lasting impact of this for some organizations. So what I mean by that is something like, we know, interactions or the way people contact us, those types of things are increasing, and they're going to continue to increase. That's going to go right. the expectation of us as customers is growing. The challenge we've got, I think, and a lot of industries have, well, how will this have a negative impact on budget and resources going forward? So the budget and the resources that we have today as a business, is that going to be the same next year when we start to look at our budgets? What have we lost as a business? You know, how has the pandemic impacted us as a business? And do we need to cut costs somewhere? And if we're starting to cut costs somewhere, typically that's your service centres, and typically it is your contact centre, because you know that is areas of the business that if they're not fully aligned with your strategy, people just see it as a really expensive commodity within the organisation. So the risk now for me is that we're going to start potentially reducing that budget and that resource, but the customer expectation and the customer kind of, you know, contact rate and are going to continue to increase, and that creates a big gap in our ability to deliver the service that we need to deliver. And that's something that if we'd have been thinking about it through the pandemic, where I'm going, okay, so how do we utilize our resources differently? How can we multi-skill our people? How can we ensure they've got, you know, different abilities to do different types of work or whatever those things are? That if that transition happens, you're in a better position to deal with the different demand that's being pushed your way. I think organisations that haven't switched and adapted and thought about that kind of long-term consequence are going to get left behind a little bit, kind of in this next kind of 12 months. And it's something that, for me, they need to start planning and thinking about now, because, like I say, you know, some industries are, you know, have been decimated by this in terms of the turnovers and profits and those types of things, and that's going to have to be recouped somewhere in an organisation. You know, it's the same for us as taxpayers, right? At some point, that's going to hit us. At some point, you know, we know it's coming. We just don't know when yet. But we know that's going to come and it's going to hit us. It's going to hit us for a long time, you know, generations potentially. And this is the same in business. There's going to be impacts for certain pockets of industry that they're going to have to try and recover it somehow. The risk, and I feel is a big risk, is that recovery of cost will potentially come out of the contact centre. And that is where we need to, as an industry, really start to think about what is that going to be and how do we start dealing with customer contact in a way that allows us to still deliver service, even though I might lose 20% of my headcount.
It's a really good point. Really good point. I think it starts with self-awareness and self-analysis around your contact centre, because more often than not, through misperception, you're right, contact centres by organisations are considered cost centres. I worked at an outsourcer where you knew every year people were coming and knocking, and they were coming to try and strip away what they thought was fat. And we were lucky at the time that we had leadership who were very proactive on, I want to say PR, to say, to meet customer expectations, this is your customer contact center, and we are lean, as you like, we're efficient, we look at continuous improvement, we've got highly talented people, and XYZ. Do you know what I mean? We kind of went on the front foot to say, you know, we know you're coming to look to cut cost, but if you want to deliver, we feel like we're set up for success. And I think that only starts with a confidence born out of self-assessment, right? To be able to look at yourselves in your contact center and say, are you as ruthlessly efficient as you can be while still maintaining all the things that we love within contact centers, the people focus, the creativity? Because you're right, there is still, right, where should we go because we need to save some costs? Let's go to the contact center. Same. And I think flipping that round in terms of, well, actually, how can we generate more revenue and service our customers better, and where's the best place to do that? It's actually the contact center.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? So all the good behaviour that we've potentially built over this last 12 months. So more flexibility in people's shifts, more time to rest and recuperate during the day, so they're not feeling bombarded. You know, all these little things that we've done to support people, you know, more flexibility on the KPI. So are we still, do we need to KPI at such a stringent level because we've got an external push, but also our people need more time, whatever it might be. These things that we've adjusted to allow us to support our people and support the customer are the things that the potential to switch back around again and gone, right, we can squeeze more productive time out of an individual, we can squeeze the AHT, we can squeeze the, you know, this metric or that metric to get more out of the people for less. And that's not necessarily the right way to go about it when we've spent 12, 18 months building some real positive experiences for our people, and then, you know, we're potentially going to strip that back down again. I think, you know, it might not be that case, and that might just be me being all doom and gloom, but I think it's a risk we need to consider, and people need to start thinking about it now, going, you know, what do we, you know, it goes back to the original thing we spoke about. What is our future state operating model? What do we need to do to support our people? How do we ensure we continue to provide flexibility? What does that actually mean then as an operating cost? And can we continue as a business to operate like this with anticipated growth that we're expecting, and what adjustments do we need to do? And let's think about those things now rather than waiting for that to be forced upon us. I think it's something we can start to think and model and plan for. And if it doesn't happen and everything stays rosy, brilliant, but at least you kind of modeled it out. I always think, you know, go back to that first stage of the pandemic. The people that thought this thing might happen were better prepared. And I think it's about preparation. So even if the worst case doesn't happen, if you're prepared for the worst case and you can switch to the worst case and you can adapt and adjust accordingly to make sure you're staying supportive, then the transition's easier. If the worst case happens and you've got no preparation in place, you will then struggle to recover.
Oh yeah, wise words, mate. Just to end then, I'm going to give you a little poll. We mentioned it a few times today. When are you likely to be, when will people get to see your lovely face to face again?
Finger in the air for those that are listening, because it's not a visual podcast, so I don't know, I did that. Honestly, no idea, right? So as a business, we're still, you know, we say travel ban. It's not a travel ban, but we're still saying, you know, we're not traveling. I think it's a challenge. So as events open back up, we might start seeing us at things like that again later in the year. I think from a day-to-day perspective, the challenge we've got, and you know, and you'll have a similar challenge, Martin, right? So the challenge we've got is that our work involves working with other businesses and other customers, right? Now, they've got to look after their own staff and their own environments and their own people without worrying about me rocking up on site and having to follow different protocols. But then similarly, we have got to protect our staff. So we've got to make sure whatever we do, that the company, if we are going to visit a company, their protocols match with our protocols and vice versa. And it becomes a bit complicated. So it's like, at the minute, it's let's just not, because let's not put any additional pressure on our customers and potential customers. Let them worry about what they need to worry about, and that's looking after themselves and their people. And then eventually we'll be allowed to kind of re-enter the world again at some point. So I don't know is the answer. For valid reasons. You know, I've worked from home for 7 years, you know, 8 years, maybe a bit longer. So the working from home thing's not a challenge. I've just never worked from home in as significant blocks of time. Because working from home when you're traveling 3 days a week is different, right? You know, sitting at the office on a Monday and a Friday and spending 3 days in airports, train stations, and whatever is a completely different. So yeah, the sooner the better. I'd like to be out seeing people because I do miss people, but I'm not gonna. I think we're doing the right thing of not putting that pressure on our potential customers or our people to kind of do that. We'll take it at whatever pace we need to take it at.
So maybe our next podcast will still be on Zoom, but the one after, or maybe the one after that, might be face to face.
Might do a face-to-face one. I want to do a
Yeah.
podcast.
That'd be good.
I think that's what we want to do. We'll do a podcast Friday evening or something. But yeah, it's just don't know if it'll ever get aired, but we could try. It is what it is.
Yeah, I'm bang up for that. That'd be great.
I'm completely resigned to the fact that I likely won't get out to any degree of consistency this year, and that's fine. I can live with that. And I think that's the other thing, talk about mental health. I know we're running out of time now, but that's the other thing. It's setting those milestones and expectations in your own mind, stop you getting depressed. That's how I deal with it. So I've already made that kind of decision in my mind that the likelihood is I won't do any significant travel this year.
Yeah.
So I can prepare for that rather than, last year where you're going, I hope I get an holiday.
Maybe, yeah.
In June, maybe. And then June comes along and you're going, oh, I'm dead upset now because I've not got on the holiday, or I'm dead upset. So I've started to set more stretching things in my mind that says, that's where I want it to happen. It's my birthday. It's my birthday in a couple of weeks. I've resigned to the fact that I'm just going to celebrate in my garden with a beer, right? Rather than anything fantastic. Whereas next year, I'm getting dancing girls and the lot, right? That's kind of, it's that kind of, see, that's how I'm dealing with it. I'm dealing with it in those chunks to say, this is how I, set an expectation that's not going to hopefully be missed.
I'm still hooked now on the concept of Get Out a Wrap podcast.
Can I?
Yeah, it's got to be, isn't it?
I'm up for that.
I'll be there. I'll have to hand over the reins though to a responsible adult. An hour, 2 hours in.
Yeah, we'll employ someone teetotal to come along and just make sure.
Please do. I had a university reunion on Zoom, and there was about 3 guys on there that I hadn't seen for 20 years, and the excitement all got too much for me. And I was very ill the next day, let's say. So yeah, I need a responsible driver if we're going to be doing this.
So and what we should do, mate, we should do it behind a paywall for charity.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right. So
yeah, because I want people to pay to see the absolute state that we can get.
So I think we put it behind a paywall for charity. Raise somebody for your charity that you support,
Naomi House.
Naomi's house. We'll do that, and then we can put all the explicit warnings on that we need to, and all that type of stuff, and protect ourselves a little bit.
Definitely, and maybe depending on who you are, you pay more. Because there are some people that I wouldn't want me to see me like that. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. Watch this space for. We'll have to come up with a better name. But the podcast, I love that. Yeah, we're going to do it.
Do it. Sounds like a plan. But it's been lovely to speak to you again.
Yeah, same, Chris. It's always a pleasure. And keep up the good work, buddy. Thanks very much. And repping Get Out a Wrap with a t-shirt as well today. Thank you very much. So
you're welcome.
A big fan.
See, fits good, nice fit as well.
Yeah, medium.
Yeah. The next one's going to be small. Anyway, on that note.
Yeah, Chris, thanks very much, mate.
Take care, Paul. Speak to you soon.